And that's really what we'd like to talk about tonight with you, and an idea for a bridge maintenance bond program patterned after our street maintenance bond program, which I think has been one of our most successful municipal programs in my time here, about the last 20 years. So a little quick history on our bridge maintenance program. The Federal Highway Administration requires that we inspect every bridge every 2 years. This has been going on throughout my career, I think probably 40 or 50 years. One of my first jobs in the city of Dodge City, Kansas, was to do the bridge inspection program with a consultant in Dodge City. So it's a really important thing, really good thing, but the reality is most cities take that report and they sort of put it on the shelf, or because they don't have any money, or they might do a little basic maintenance, or they might put up a new load rating for that bridge, but they just don't have the funding to do much with it. So again, we're not unique in this. Things kind of have to get pretty bad before you start allocating big dollars. The firm that does our work right now, H.W. Lochner, great engineering firm out of Oklahoma City. They've done our last 3 cycles every 2 years, and we really like their work. Council adopted our first bridge maintenance budget in FY18. So about 5-6 years ago, we came to you and said, hey, can we start to allocate money for bridge maintenance? And you did so for $100,000. We were just guessing. That wasn't nearly enough. So this year, you bumped that up to $750,000, and over the course of those 5 or 6 years, you've now allocated $2 million. We appreciate that very much, and we've made a real dent in the bridges that we could do some good work on. On the screen is a picture of the Porter Avenue Bridge over Little River, located just north of Tecumseh Road. I think that's Ward 5. Built in 1937, and you'll see that a lot of our bridges are pretty old. This one is classified as functionally obsolete because it's too narrow. We weren't designing bridges and roads the proper width back in 1937. You can imagine the vehicles we were designing bridges for in 1937. So if you take all of those ratings that I talked about, and this is a very elaborate engineering process, it's a really well done inspection process, lots of engineering work that goes into that, and a pretty elaborate report. But at the end of the day, they give them a grade, 0 to 100s, kind of like a grading scale. And you can see this pie chart kind of represents our current condition. If you take those 80 bridges and look at that rating, and so we're not doing too bad. I mean, this is a good news story here. About 3/4 of the pie were kind of a passing grade, 70 or above. That's not too shabby. We can do some work with that. We can do some maintenance. We can keep those bridges going. But about 23-24% of our bridges are in pretty dire need of attention. So not bad at all. I suspect that's not uncommon in other cities. This is a real busy map. Well, we've got better maps for you later that might help you to see this better. But what I wanted to leave you with here is that we have a lot of really good data. We know a lot about our bridges. Every one of those little white boxes with the red print is a bridge report. We have tabular data. We have bridge numbers. We have calculations. We know what we have, and we know what we have to fix, and we have a pretty good idea what it's going to cost and how to do it. And so that's kind of where Joe's going to take you through the rest of this presentation.
So we asked the problem of why is this, or the question of why is this a problem now? It's not that this is a new problem that we weren't aware of, but as we've seen over the last 6 years, the conditions are trending in the wrong direction. So over the last 6 years, we've had 3 bridge failures: the Havenbrook Street Bridge, the Main Street Bridge, and the Imhoff Road Bridge. And those were catastrophic failures that required closure of the road and major rehabilitation and reconstruction activities to get those reopened. And then our most recent closure is a precautionary closure, trying to get ahead of the catastrophe at 60th Avenue Northeast, located between Rock Creek and Tecumseh Road. And that one is, again, a precaution just due to the structural integrity of some of those main structural members. These failures come with no warning, usually a result of heavy rain or storm events, following flooding, something like that. The photo here is the Havenbrook Bridge in September of 2016. The Main Street Bridge over Brookhaven Creek in August of 2018. I believe that the contract was underway at that point, and the road collapsed in the middle of the night due to high water.
Tuesday night, council meeting. I was on my way home from council, but trying to go down West Main Street.
Missed it barely.
And everyone is familiar with the Imhoff Road Bridge over Imhoff Creek in July of 2021. This bridge, the main structure is 50 years old, and what it took to repair that bridge is new end sections on both the north and south side of the bridge to include new wing walls and new concrete aprons to protect the undermining of that channel. As our infrastructure ages, so does our mobility. All of the vehicles that you can see pictured in this graphic are a regular occurrence every day as we travel around town. And every time we have to load post a bridge or limit the accessibility of these vehicles, we have to move them to another location, another route, and ultimately cause more wear and tear on that alternate route. So you can see your standard pickup truck is 3 tons, which leads us to the 60th Avenue Northeast Bridge, closed on December 1st of 2022. And this bridge was built in 1940. You'll see a common trend amongst some of our load posted bridges. Think about the environment that we had when these bridges were constructed 80 plus years ago. A lot of the bridges in rural Norman were still considered county bridges. They were not a part of the city system. A lot of the roads out there were dirt roads or chip seal roads. They weren't paved. And it just really wasn't designed to handle the world we live in today. The Robinson Street Bridge, located just east of 72nd Avenue Northeast, built in 1938. Load posted at 5 tons. And then the Franklin Road Bridge over Little River, located just west of 36th Avenue Northeast, built in 1942. We've coined this one the Toby Keith Bridge, given its location. But this one, good news, it can technically carry an ambulance, but no school bus, no fire truck, no dump trucks.
No trash trucks?
See the trend there. And this next graphic here is just a map to show you some of those the other load posted locations throughout the city of Norman. So as Sean mentioned, this is a very data-rich program. We've taken that data based off of our 2021 inspection report that we received in January of 2021, and we started to digest that information. I'm sorry, December of 2021. We digested that information, and again, Brandon Brooks and I worked together to create a rank order system of our bridges. What are the highest priorities and as they go down. So we utilize the age, condition rating, and load ratings to establish kind of a top 20 worst structures that we had. And council approved a contract with H.W. Lochner in January of 22 to do a very high level discovery of all of those locations. And what they did is they went out, just kind of followed up on those locations, looked at the sizing of those structures, and put together some very high level cost estimates that would represent the need of today. We took that data, we inserted some contingencies for engineering, right-of-way, utilities, everything that goes with the design and construction of these structures, and we came to the following 2 options. So option 1 is our, call it the whole enchilada, bridge maintenance bond program. So this program includes 10 bridge replacements and 9 bridge locations for major rehabilitation or maintenance. And when we talk about that, we're talking deck replacement, taking the top off of a bridge and putting a new top on. That's what we consider major. This program would be constructed over the course of 10 years at a price tag of $50 million with a 20-year maturity. And the table below gives you a rough average of what those costs would look like. So for a $200,000 home, the average monthly property tax increase would be roughly $5.10. Again, this is a 20-year maturity, so we would complete the construction over the course of 10 years, but we would have to wait till the end of that 20-year maturity before we could technically renew without a tax increase. To give you an idea of some of the costs associated with bridge maintenance, bridge replacement, we have the Main Street Bridge here at the top right, $4.9 million project, reconstructed the bridge, but also included channel stabilization north and south of the bridge. And sometimes these projects will include channel work because we've got to make sure that channel doesn't move and take out the new structure that we put in. And then just the Imhoff Road Bridge emergency repair, again, new end sections on the north and south side of the structure with a price tag of just under $2 million. This is a map showing the locations of the proposed work. Red triangles are going to be your replacements. Blue hexagons are going to be the major rehabilitation and maintenance. You do see a trend. A lot of our replacements do reside in the rural areas. Again, it just speaks to the timeline. A lot of those are our very old county bridges that we inherited as we incorporated. So back in October, we presented to the Community Planning and Transportation Committee, and we received some feedback to maybe scale the project down, see what other options were available. So we came up with option 2. This program includes 3 bridge replacements and 8 major rehabilitation and maintenance projects. This would be a 5-year construction at a price tag of $20 million and the maturity of 5 years. So this is modeled after our street maintenance bond program. We would complete our work in the 5 years and we would have to go out and renew with the public at an election. You can see the price tag per month is a little bit higher there. It's just the way the financials work out, but for a $200,000 home, average of $6.93 monthly property tax increase. And that is the reason why we closed the 60th Avenue Northeast Bridge over Rock Creek. That is one of the structural members on top of the pier cap under the bridge, and you can stick your hand through that hole. So
I'd rather not.
That's what I do too.
when
School bus going over there.
Take your word for it.
we received the inspection report, that bridge was placed on an annual inspection cycle. When we received that report, we reviewed, spoke with our consultant, talked about options to redistribute weight over the bridge, maybe do a 1 lane in each direction or 1-way flagged situation. And then we also had our consultant that is currently working on the design of this location go out and conduct a peer review of that inspection report so we could have 2 data points to rely on. And ultimately, we felt it best as staff to recommend closure of the bridge for safety purposes. This is the map that shows this proposed option. Again, you have the 3 replacements and 8 rehabilitations.
So some key takeaways for you as we wrap up here. Again, those are just 2 options. You can do whatever you'd like. There's lots of different ways to do that. I want to mention, go back here, and Anthony may have a comment. Just to remind you that this option 2 is a 5-year maturity, okay? So, and I think with major infrastructure, you can go as many as 20 years. Am I right, Anthony?
Yes.
If you want it, if you chose to.
Essentially, we try to match the useful life of the capital improvement with the maturity of the bond. So because these are long-lived capital improvements, you would tend to go toward the longer maturity. But that's just a rule of thumb.
Councilmember Lane.
Well, I mean, more explanation on that, because that was my question. I would say that 5-year maturity, so like you said on the, was it 20, I'm sorry if I didn't take.
Yeah. And again, we patterned this after
20
our.
years and 5 years.
Yeah. So the difference here, the street maintenance bond program has a 5-year maturity because the life of street maintenance is really 5 years. It's not 20. A bridge can be 20. A major road corridor can be 20. Anything that's got a life of 20 or greater can have a maturity. So again, this is a 20-year maturity with a $50 million bond package, which is why those numbers are down a bit. And this is a 5-year program with a 5-year maturity.
So basically, is this the most aggressive way to get this taken care of, is the 5-year way?
Great question, Councilman Wright.
Going quick.
I would say the first one is probably the most aggressive and most comprehensive.
That's some,
Yeah.
that's what I want to know. You have all these options. Just, if you say, hey, which one do you pick? You've given us options. Which one do you believe is the?
Yeah. Well,
I know, if you did 1, 2, 3, I don't know if you have them in your order of preference, or you're just saying these are the different ones, or?
yeah, we think the best approach here is to address those 19 structures. We think they all need to be addressed.
Like, if you did the 5, after 5 years, you could do that same one without a tax increase. That's what I'm saying. That's
the
more
theory.
aggressive. You're getting more in that time, in that 10
Yes,
years.
sir.
That's where I was going.
That's
Except
what
you have to vote on it again. So that's maybe the difference. Would voters
But
support it?
if people see that you are actually doing what you're saying you're doing in that 5 years, they're gonna say, heck yes, keep fixing our bridges.
Appreciate that. And that's
So,
exactly what happens with our
This
street
is,
program.
this is what we're supposed to do. We do a whole lot of stuff that we may or may not supposed to do. These are the things that the municipal government is supposed to be doing, so I wanna, maybe it's crossing bridges on buses or anything, let's get bridges taken care of and do it as rapidly as possible. That's what I'm saying. Is that the most rapid approach? 5 years, 5 years, 5 years?
I think so, yes.
Okay, that's all I want to know. Thank you.
Councilmember Peacock.
Yeah, just kind of the similar line of thinking. I want to do what gives us the best chance of succeeding when it comes to a vote. And that's why I was interested in the 5 years, because it's, it's a smaller bite at the apple, allows you to come back and re-up, and, if it's as successful as the street maintenance program, yeah, you're going to get, I don't want to say guaranteed.
Those little
re-ups.
signs,
Yeah.
we're working on your street, sorry.
No, you're exactly right.
That was
It's-
brilliant. It worked
It's
great.
impactful. I mean, I see them work. They're working in my neighborhood today, actually, doing street stuff. So I know this is such a critical component, just like water is. We can't get one swing, is the way I look at it. So I want to make sure we've teed it up the
Yeah.
best way possible to make sure that it passes. Even if it's smaller up front, I want to make sure it passes. So.
Councilmember Holman.
I agree with that line of thinking there. I think it goes with just basing it off our very successful road street maintenance program and being able to show residents, we're going to do these projects and then say, look, we did these and now we've got these other ones we need to do. We've proven to you. So I think that's a good, as much as I would like to take it all at once, I think there is probably a higher probability of the 5-year. Maybe it's successful and the council and after that decides they want to extend it to a longer program, but it probably would be good to start at 5 and go from there. Is there, I guess, is there any anticipation of federal money or state money, or is this an anticipation that we would be paying for it all of ourselves, and then any additional money would be additional?
I should have finished my next slide. I'll get to that if you'll allow me in a
Sure.
moment. You bet.
Councilmember Tortorella.
Well, actually, it was my question too, but I think the shorter look, Anthony, interest rates, we lock ourselves into a 20-year interest rate. Rates are high today. They can drop in the future, and we're stuck. We're locked in, right?
Actually, the yield curve is inverted right now. 20-year rates are below 5-year rates right now.
Are they below 5-year rates?
Interesting times, but
That is interesting. All right, I'll wait for the next slide.
Thanks, sir.
I'm with him on this too as well.
Councilmember Schuler.
Yeah, that's, Councilmember Lynn kind of hit it. I was trying to figure out what was gonna be the best to get the most done over period after period. And even just looking at kind of the map for the 5-year program. I know that it's not exactly like within each ward, but like they're on the boundaries of all wards. So I think that even in that 5-year program, we would touch each ward in some capacity, just like you think about doing with our street maintenance bond. So I think, making sure that we are being thoughtful of like where, and I understand that it's also like based on need and the rankings and, which is what we do with the street maintenance program too. I just want to make sure that we're really thinking about this critically, because as you know, having gone through the Imhoff Road emergency, bridge emergency, I think this has been one of my big things that I think we need to continue to find money for. We need to figure out what the solution is, because with some of these bridges, if they fail, just like we saw on Imhoff Road, it's a huge challenge for our residents to navigate the city. So I just want to get us to a place where we're thinking about this as strategically as we can, and making sure that we're showing the residents that we really care about this.
Councilmember Green?
I'd just like to point out that either option 1 or 2 has both the bridges that have Ward 4 being replaced or rehabbed or repaired. But that said, the 5-year version over the 10-year version just says that we're like paying more because we don't trust we'll have the bridges done in the 10-year plan. Is that what I'm to understand? Because like you look at 244, it's an increase of roughly $1 and some change. You start working your way up, it's like $3 at the top end. So like if you're gonna do it 5-year after 5-year, you're not really like saving, you're kind of costing more at the end on the.
But we would have to wait 20 years to come back for a bond program, not 10 years, because it's in the 20-year maturity, the first one.
Right.
So we would be able to do 4 cycles of bridges, which would essentially get us more bridges, because we can identify
because
more.
our citizens don't trust us to do it, so they're gonna pay more for these little
Let's
chunks.
change that.
I mean, I think we can do more over the 20 years if we do it this way, and it's not going to increase. It'll increase a little bit more, but it's over the life of the bond. We'll have done more. I mean, am I not understanding that correctly?
Well, I know it's kind of counterintuitive, but in the shorter maturity, you're levying more tax, you're raising more tax. So conceptually, if you have levied more tax and you keep the levy at that rate, then yes, you have brought in more revenue over a 20-year period.
So you can do more projects over a 20-year period.
Yes, you just levied more tax.
What is the fair? What is fair to the citizen?
That's a subjective question.
Just asking. It's like we also have to think about what it costs to live in Norman right now.
It does. Councilmember Foreman, did you want to say?
Well, wait.
One of the things that I look at in there with the shorter turnaround, if something becomes an oh dear, we find something goes wrong with the bridge that we didn't expect for one reason or another, a fire on top of the bridge and with a tanker truck or something that happens. All kinds of dumb things happen. We've got a quicker turnaround to be able to get those bridges repaired if we're not indebted up 20 years. I know it's more expensive looking to do short-term debt, but the pain's over easier, and it gives actually the citizens much more direction in which bridges we choose, which more anything else. Because apparently your however you decided to do your sorting of which are the worst bridges and all is a successful program of one sort or another. It's as good as we can figure out how to get the best ones. And some of those bridges, I'll guarantee you, when I started here, were lousy, and now they're lousier.
Yeah.
And to think of a school bus or a truck or a combine going across one of those and just not paying attention to the sign, I don't really want that on the front page of the transcript. Nothing personal, Mindy, but.
It would be on the front page.
Guaranteed. Thank you, Mayor, appreciate that. And I would just mention that what you said is exactly right. This is like your street maintenance bond program, this is a data-driven program. We're not just picking a bridge in every ward. That's not the way this is happening. We're letting the data drive these.
Just a quick comment on that point right there. I think this approach only increases our chances of getting a stormwater utility passed in the future, because you look at the focus in Ward 5, and that's usually the group, when it comes to a stormwater utility, that says, well, you guys don't ever do anything for us out in Ward 5. So we've got tangible proof that we are, doing what we can out in Ward 5.
Thank you for that.
So I did the quick math, just really quick, on the difference between each of the increases. So 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, just an average for the home. So in the 100,000 category, it's 87 cents different per month. For 200,000, it's 183, and then 300,000, it's $2.80. So that's, yeah. So that's the difference between each of the options if we choose to do. I'm not saying that that's not
That's good.
challenging and couldn't be for some folks, but like, just to put it into perspective, that is the amount that we're talking about in difference per month.
Councilmember Foreman?
I'm gonna ask now. So the 5-year with inflation and everything, that's probably a safer bet because things could still skyrocket, or not locked into one little thing, and we can make adjustments every 5 years.
We've done our best, Councilmember, to project out 10 years, but you're right, it's easier to estimate 5 years out.
There is a philosophy about, in volatility, you take shorter bites in anticipation that things could get a lot uglier or things could get better. And if you're all bought in at the high, you can't take advantage of the low. So
Yeah.
Flexibility.
So Mayor, a few takeaways, I'll wrap up and I'll try to address Councilmember Holman and Tortorella's question. So 80 bridges is what we have in Norman, that's our obligation. We haven't talked about culvert crossings, which we don't call bridges, there's a whole technical definition of those. And many of those culvert crossings were sort of in that stormwater package, when the thing that we've been taking to the voters, that's where we sort of put that. We put bridges more in kind of the street category. But just understand that there's 380 crossings out there that could all wash away or catastrophically fail. Culvert crossings are just not quite as expensive or as encompassing sometimes. If you take nothing at all tonight away, please take this, that our bridges are safe. If we have an unsafe bridge, we think we know about it. I think 60th Avenue Northeast is the example of that. As soon as we knew that there was something happening, we met with the city manager and made decisions quickly in the interest of public safety. So I don't want anyone to think they're driving over unsafe bridges. We're tracking them very, very carefully and very frequently. 23 of our bridges, of our 80 bridges, were constructed before 1950. So imagine a house constructed before 1950 that had no rehab, no add-ons, no kitchen, nothing in 70 or 80 years. We wouldn't ever do that. And I guarantee you, the civil engineers in 1950 who were designing these bridges never imagined they would still be in operation 70, 80 years later. So that kind of defines the problem. It's many of those 23 that we're talking about here. We hope that you'll consider something, some kind of a bridge maintenance bond election, maybe in late 23, 24. We think we need time. Like Councilmember Peacock said, I don't want to be the department that loses another election here, frankly. I think we're 2 for 10 in recent times. So I hope we have time to really poll the voters. We did that with our stormwater election, and we knew that it was tenuous, frankly, and it turned out to be a failure there. So we need to take time and really test, I think, some of these packages and some of these ideas with our voters and make sure that they're agreeing with you all. We've got time to do that. And then just want to mention to the question about federal funding, there really is no steady, predictable funding source of this scale. I can tell you, Scott and I and all of our staff are looking for every grant opportunity and submitting every grant application, and so far, we've gotten that much back. It's just not there for cities like us. We might luck out and get one bridge every 3 to 5 years if we're really lucky, but so far, we haven't been able to get any.
Just for my own knowledge, if you have this project and you have a bond on it already, how does that affect how you can get federal funding for? I'm guessing it would have to go to project outside of what you've already bonded. Is that?
I don't
know.
think so. Usually, we actually match bond funds with federal funds, Councilmember. So
Is that like at the same time? I'm saying if you had one going and then one came, could you add it in addition to what you already have going?
Good
since it's an
question. In
existing
my experience,
project?
usually when a project is already funded, you're less inclined to get a federal grant after the fact. So, right, that's exactly right. Again, we are,
Sean, the reality, when we talk about shovel-ready, these steps we are taking are making us more shovel-ready and potentially more competitive. I mean, we're all still waiting for 1.6 trillion in infrastructure money that sounded like it got approved, and we're still not seeing those dollars be made available. The notices of funding availability are not circulating yet. But the fact that this homework's been done and the fact that council signed that contract with the firm last January to help us get here, we're in better shape than a lot of our neighboring agencies who don't know what we know. The information that these guys have gathered make us very competitive when that opportunity does present itself. So we haven't wasted a step, and I think if we grab the package that council envisions, yeah, the next one on that list is still equally valuable for us to go out and chase those federal dollars on, and we still have great stories to tell about how bad the rest of the bridges on that list really are.
my friend Anthony Francisco calls it the train from Washington. Don't wait for the train from Washington, he always said.
Councilmember Foreman, did you have a question?
I was just gonna suggest, those crummy bridge pictures, the next time we go for stormwater, just that on the mailer.
We got plenty of crummy pictures, that's for sure.
Use them all.
One thing I'd
Washed
like
out
to see if we
from
can,
stormwater.
is since we're setting this up as a discussion with the public, if we, I don't mean to point, sorry. If we can get this slideshow and add a couple of slides on what algorithm did you use to choose the bridge? Not necessarily the math to it, but
You bet.
these are the things we looked at, and help people make those decisions if we can put that online.
Happy to.
And just
Happy
give
to.
them a way to do it.
Mrs. Gerska can make that so.
Yes. Want to mention, first, thanks to council for approving a contract last October for the design of 60th Avenue. So we already have the engineering design process underway. We will have the preliminary engineering report next month. So we will be in a sort of shovel-ready, not quite shovel-ready, but we're moving in that direction of being able to, if we can get funding to rebuild that bridge, it won't remain closed. But until it does, it will. So that's kind of how you get out ahead. That's how we would do this program, do the engineering design 1 year, do the construction next year for a cycle of several. We are pursuing every grant opportunity we can, I promise you. For a while there in 22, Scott and I were getting 2 a week, and we were actively pursuing. It's just not there for bridges and not local bridges, off-system bridges. We might luck out, but I'm not going to.
If I may, in my tenure, the only time that I remember getting a lot of bridge money from the federal government was not highway money, it was FEMA money. So I guess you could pray for a big old flood. She's out a whole bunch of bridges.
That's too much of a headache for me. Hard pass.
Depending on the state of the
Disaster.
And then finally, and I just would mention, we did this with our stormwater program in 2019. After the citizen committee met for a couple of years, we actually went out, hired a firm that did outreach and polling and focus groups. And frankly, they came back in a meeting like this with you all and said, boy, we're not sure you're going to get this thing approved, but it's your call. And we chose to go ahead, and it went down. So maybe we should have listened to them. We were also anxious to get out there and try to get funding for stormwater. I think we thought maybe there was a good chance, and we got closer that time. But anyway, I think there's some work we can do with this. Like the mayor said, get out there and talk to folks. I think the bridge maintenance concept will be better received than stormwater. Stormwater is kind of that invisible infrastructure that nobody seems to understand. Most people we talk to sort of understand bridges, and they understand not being able to take school buses to their neighborhood and things of that nature. So I feel like we'll get some pretty good support, but I'd sure like to know that before you all approve a ballot and we go out to the voters. Thank you.
When would we try to take it to the ballot?
Well, I mean, it'd certainly be up to council. You have way more options in odd
Is there like
years
a-
than you do even years, obviously.
Ideal time?
really
What
ideal. I mean,
months
you-
typically are street bonds gone out, Sean? Do we?
August was one, April was one, so I don't know that there was a magic formula to it. But I think,
And not bad to stay where we've had success in the past in terms of landing on a ballot, or we're hopefully get good voter turnout and good participation.
Are any of these bridges on school routes? Were school routes and they had to change?
yes, probably all of them,
Well,
or
that's
most
That's good
of them.
info.
We may work with our partners at Norman Public School.
Hey, sorry. Perfect. I mean, they have those Thursday folders.
Yeah.
You can stuff those Thursday folders, and I know you get a lot of stuff in there, but if you do it right with like school bus and like X and like make something to grab their attention, like that's a scary sight. Here's what's happening in Norman. We need your help.
Hopefully they never. Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage us all to talk with our constituents about these options. Definitely lean towards that option too as it stands right now, but maybe we'll hear differently from the public when the public learns more about this. And then I don't know if there's an opportunity to see if any of our state representatives would be interested in helping us out with some sort of legislation, just given our, I think of Norman and Oklahoma City as having this large land area to maintain and not the type of population density that would be required typically. So I'm wondering how Oklahoma City handles their 600 plus square miles and all the rural country bridges that must exist. And then, you know, our unique situation of having a large rural area with bridges that were constructed before the city even took over that area. And none of us were involved in that annexation, but that's what we have, and we've got a duty to maintain the infrastructure, I think. So I'd be very interested in if there was any opportunity for the state to help us in some way with this kind of unique situation where we have a large landmass, but our population isn't
Or
really.
even the county helping with road
The rural
tax
ones
that they
too,
get.
yeah.
They may, because they're,
They use those roads too.
Yeah.
but, and I guess one of my other questions is, when we pick these bridges, if we pick 5 or we pick 10, how long is the tail of bridges we have to fix correctly? If we had to fix all of them right now, would that be 15 bridges?
19 would
19.
probably be the target, Mayor.
Good gravy.
That's really the ones that we've identified there.
Not that you're counting.
If you think about it, if you
wasn't a
think
rough
about
thing.
it from a standpoint of just simple data, right? Your average design life on a bridge is going to be, for bridges like ours, off-system bridges, 50 to 75 years. We have 80 bridges in our inventory. We find outliers here and there. We found a few more this last year. Those are included in the 80 now. So go based off those numbers, we should be replacing 1.3 bridges a year in order to keep up with the design life of those bridges and the useful life of those bridges.
This happened with ODOT. There's some other engineers who can probably tell a story better than I can, but they started with 1,100 bridges that were needed to be replaced. And about year 3, they had 300 more that had come online. So the 1,100 became 2,000 or something before it was all over, because it took 20 years for them to replace the 1,100. See, so we're behind the curve. It's going to take a while to catch up.
Well, but we can get towards a solution. That's the neat thing, and we know what the problem is. If we didn't know that we didn't know, we'd be in trouble. Other thoughts, comments, or anything on this presentation?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
All right,
Good presentation.
we're gonna shift to building code discussion regarding updates. I didn't read it in the order you printed it.
second to.
Everybody remember Greg Clark, our chief building official?
Hello. Thank you, everybody, for coming and hang out a little bit. Appreciate the work you all do. You get paid real well for it, so that's the good news, so. Yeah, here to speak to you a little bit. Oh, I guess I gotta swap
Tell us
PowerPoints
about
here.
bridges?
Don't know that you want me talking about bridges.
Looks like it's to the left there. There we
There
go.
we go. So I have a brief presentation about updating our building codes here in the city of Norman, and I'll get through it. I mean, if you have a question in the middle of it, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll pick up the questions at the end, and we can kind of go from there. A little bit of background about codes in Oklahoma, and this is, some of you all may have heard me say this before, but maybe not, and so a little refresher. So in Oklahoma, codes are adopted at the state level. There's kind of a perception that Norman has its own code, Oklahoma City has a code, Moore has a code. We have one code for a state, and it's a base code, and they adopt that code, and they tell all the cities in the state, this is the minimum standard. And we're statutorily supposed to adopt and update and keep current with those codes. That process, I won't go super deep in it, but there's a state organization, the Oklahoma Uniform Building Code Commission. They have a body, they assemble committees, technical committees that review these codes, make suggestions, make recommendations, and update them at the state level. They come with a date to tell them this is an implementation date, and they kind of tell us cities, okay, it's time for you to get on board and keep current with the state code. Cities are allowed to adopt them and make changes and make improvements, go above code, if you will, clarify the code and make some editorial type decisions like that. But really, they're not looking for us to reduce the overall life safety of the code. And that's kind of the general principle. So when you go out in the public and you hear people say, well, the Norman code is this, and it's just, very difficult. I mean, in a respectful way, I challenge you to educate them a little bit too, that look, this really is, for the most part, the same code that they have in Moore and Oklahoma City. Right? It really is. That we can make changes, and we have a few local changes that do go above the minimum standard that we've had there, and Moore has a couple standards that are above the minimum code, so there can be variation from city to city, but it's in the weeds. It's really small.
That's basically almost answered my question, but if you said percentage-wise, you said in the weeds, it's a little small, but what is that significant change? Does it change something dramatically to make it difficult? That's what I'm saying. What's the level of that above and beyond? That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I'd have to if we did a cost-benefit analysis of all the changes in Norman and, took a model building, like a home, a home would be an easy one to do because there's home after home.
Yeah.
Our changes on our home would be almost, I'd say it'd be closer to zero than any number. We have a few local amendments that we've had for almost 20 years. One of them is that we like to maintain that you can't use aluminum wiring in a home. And that's been in the code in Norman since 1980. The reality is if you go to Oklahoma City and Moore, they may not have that amendment. Are people using aluminum wiring in those markets? They're not. So I guess if you wanted to do a cost benefit, you could find the difference in aluminum versus copper, but it would be, again, it's effectively close to zero. We have we have a tree ordinance in Norman that past councils have put in. And so, which requires all new single family to have a tree, right? And so it says put the tree, take the tree, put it, somewhere that it'll create this canopy over streets, right? So that may not exist anymore, right? But people are going to put trees probably on their new single-family home anyway. We're just kind of steering them to put that tree to create this canopy over the street, as opposed to they might put the tree in the side or the backyard. So again, depending on how you want to look at it, it would be pretty small.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So a few important dates. The state body, the OUBCC, updated, but for the for the residential code. In 22, September 14th, they said, okay, cities, it's time to get on board with updating your residential code to this 2018 standard. And in 2021, they on September 14th, they also told us, okay, it's time to get on the standard. We kind of paused, knowing that you know, obviously, and we're not the only city. City of Oklahoma City hasn't updated. A lot of cities haven't actually got to this 2018 code, but most all of us are working or progressing, and some cities have actually got on that standard already. So we're in target in terms of how we're comparing to others, but we are technically, it is time to just to be real blunt. They don't really have a punitive body who goes out. I guess an attorney general or somebody could cite somebody or come after a city. They hasn't been a history of that, but as your building official, you know, serving at your pleasure, I mean, it puts me in an awkward spot. Like, people call me every day, what code are you on, Greg? And my answer to them is, the City of Norman's under the 2015 code. However, the state standard technically is the 2018, in which that is an awkward, confusing answer that I am ready to not have to tell people anymore, because what does that mean? Even for like a city project, like they're building it, so do they build it to the 2018 and be good with the state, or the 2015 is you know, is a situation we can readily update. So I've kind of covered a lot on this slide. If you do look in your packets, you do look at this electronically. If you really want good sleeping material, there's 3 great links there. There is the, you can find the base code on the ICC. The ICC is the International Code Council. They're the ones who have been writing the codes that we've adopted for decades. And that ICC body, again, if you want to get right into it, it's the same body that adopts codes for Oregon and Kansas and Texas. So again, there's really, used to be there was a lot of disparity from city to state about codes, and some even had organic codes, but this International Code Council has really, you know, consolidated the code materials. So most every state has some year edition that they've adopted of this international code. So anyway, but there's 3 links there. One will take you to the base code. The second link there will take you to the state's changes that they have made. And the third link there is a private website, but this outfit called UpCodes has collated the state changes and wove them into the national code. So you can actually go to that one website and kind of see what the language in the state code was. So it is a helpful tool for me. So I'm just kind of sharing it with you all and anyone who's interested or maybe listening. So, knowing we were going to adopt this code and wanting to get on board, we started outreach on this for some time, and I'm just going to hit a few of the bullets about what we've done over the past year plus, trying to prepare for the building community, our stakeholders, the folks that have to come work here, about some of the changes and just some of what we did. We hosted 2 different public meetings over the summer. It was had pretty good attendance on one of them. The other one didn't have as much interest, but it was mostly covered residential code changes, and we had a decent turnout for those. So we sent invites to every builder, everyone hold a permit. We went back into our database, found emails, and sent mass emails. Felt like I was spamming somebody, but we tried to get the word out that we were holding these public meetings and let people know that we were having them. And again, had way more people at the second meeting, and they were still interested in what I had to say in the first meeting. So I went and recorded a webinar, put it on our website. It's been on our webinar. Again, you want to hear this voice of mine, put you to sleep. You can go to our website and listen to me for about an hour and 45 minutes talk about residential code changes. So it's been
a free
that.
app.
Good times.
Yeah,
It's a free sleep app.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. So that was another item. Part of those meetings and on our website, we've had what we call a code change request form. Anybody, stakeholder, a builder, any interested citizen, had the opportunity to fill out the code change request form and make suggestions, recommendations, either you should change this or you shouldn't change that. And so we put that out there. We did not have a lot of feedback. I'll just be blunt. We really didn't. And so kind of the next main bullet we did is using some outside resources, these code changes being national changes, there's lots of publications, and the ICC publishes bulletins that really details all the lists. So we went back through our email list. If they were a mechanical contractor, we sent them the significant changes to the mechanical code. If it was an electrical contractor, we sent them the significant changes to electrical code, and so on and so forth. So they received the information. With that, we also gave them that code change request form, and again, not a lot of feedback. And again, part of that is because we are on a statewide cycle. This used to be, frankly, a more divisive topic, like, because there was no minimum, like we could stay under the 97 code for forever. But now that there is a state body and their goal is to kind of make sure all the cities are, working the same way, is just frankly not been as controversial a topic. So that's kind of the main things we've done. I mean, passively, the inspector staff, our permitting staff, we always try to educate people and let them know, hey, code changes are coming, and here's what they are. And again, we'd actually get some pretty good engagement there, oftentimes at our counter, and we'd give them resources, and we're certainly willing to share. So, just a few of the things.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you might have covered this and I didn't catch it, but how often does the state update their requirements for the code?
They've been doing it. They're statutorily, they're under no strict timeline. Like, they don't actually have to. They've been generally doing, they adopted the 09 code, was the very first code they ever adopted. They did not adopt the 2012 versions. The international code publishes every 3 years, for starters. So the first code they adopted was 09. The second code they adopted was the 15. And there wasn't actually a 6-year run in there, because when they adopted the 09, it was, I think, already like the year 2011. They've been doing it about every 3-ish years, but they're not obligated to do that.
Okay. And does it typically take us this long to update our codes based on what the state has recommended or set the standard for?
In this cycle has been a little bit longer, frankly, because they did us all a disservice. And I don't mean that bad if I'm watching, but they did. They adopted a commercial code 1 year and didn't adopt the residential component of it. And then they waited an entire year and then adopted a residential, which would have forced all the cities to go through 2 adoption cycles, which is, frankly, is twice the effort, twice the work, twice the outreach. So most of the cities, ours included, I would say generally from when they adopt, probably 18 months, 12 to 18 months will always be my goal. Yes.
Okay, so we're already beyond the 3 years. 2021 would have been 3 years from 18. So they could come back in really at any time.
They could come by. I mean, it's not impossible. They actually have new leadership up there, or having new leadership, so it's tough to say what direction they'll go. There's some folks in the code community, they're just like, they want to hammer. There's a new code, let's adopt it today. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not one of those people. I like being behind a code cycle or two. Everyone thinks that was the latest and greatest code must mean we're getting a better product, and there may be some arguments to be made there, but that's not always the case. So
It's like getting the first version of a car,
Yeah.
it is.
right? Like the first model, the
The
first
very
year.
first model, and so you get to worry about all those weird electrical bugs and the
Whatever.
fuses. A super quick example, there's an electrical device called an arc fault circuit protector. All new homes have them. But if you were one of the cities that were in Gen 1 of that code and adopted an arc fault, as soon as it got adopted, your customers paid through their nose for this device that was horrible. And it tripped. You couldn't, they were having all kinds of nuisance headaches with it. The folks that were 2-3 years behind it, those products became refined, it became more reliable, the price dramatically, dipped, got a much better product and spent less money. So I'm personally not one of those that thinks that every time a code gets updated, we need to just be front and center doing it. I like, and frankly, it's very disruptive too. So the changes from code to code, they're not always dramatic, but if you're, a spec builder or you're a designer and you've worked really hard and you built spreadsheets and or you're used to building a certain way and they've updated the code every three years, I mean, that's a pain. It's a pain. I hate to say it, but yeah, we got to retrain our staffs, and no, we're not doing 7 3/4 now, it's 7 5/8, and old habits die hard, and so if I only have to come to you every 6 years for code adoption, I don't think that's a bad thing,
Yeah,
frankly.
Yeah, I was just trying to think about like when's the next time the state might come to us, and then we're back in the cycle again. So I would like to minimize the amount that you're continually having to get.
Since you don't want me here.
No, I just want to make your job easier.
Which are their approved permits.
So, yeah, I was just trying to understand the cycle and when we should typically be seeing stuff like this and kind of what the challenge is.
Right now, it seems at the state level, they're doing it about every 6 years. There is a 2024 code being written right now that's nearly 100%, and they'll probably publish that document. The 24 version will probably be published in, coming up. It'll be January 1. There'll be a 2024 book. You can probably buy the 2024 book in December, to be honest.
So we'll be back here next year.
Well, until the state adopts
Well,
it.
again, they have new leadership, so it's tough to say. And some of the electrical committees at the state are very aggressive. They'd like to update that code as soon as they can. Most of the other committees are a little more level, so we'll see. They do have new leadership. We're all hoping, and he comes from a city, so I think I hope he's appreciative of he should be appreciative of the pains and challenges with it. So I'm no promises, but.
So let's get this one done so that you have as much time as possible until the state does their next one. Right?
By the time we get it approved.
Pretty much.
Okay.
So, skipped over. So, we haven't updated some fees in a while, and again, it wasn't looking to ram a whole bunch of new fees with the new adoption in here, but it kind of was time. And so we proposed some fee changes to what we call the re-inspect fee and the base fee. The re-inspect fee currently right now is $25. And that fee is, so we send an inspector out to the house. There's 10 things wrong, or they weren't ready for it, they leave a correction notice, and we have to come back and look at the exact same scope of work. And so, in those scenarios, we charge a re-inspect fee. It's been $25, we're proposing making that $35. There's also some minimum permit fees that we deal with. We're just standalone permits, and again, those standalone base permit fees have been $25 for a long time. And so again, we're asking to raise those base permit fees up to $35. There's a few statistics in there for you. These were in calendar year 21. We did 27,000 inspections. Of the 27,000 inspections we did, only 3,200 of them actually had a re-inspect fee. The other, whatever the math is, the other 24-ish thousand inspections didn't have a fee at all. So they were either approved or the inspector decided not to levy a fee or some combination. In 2021, we also issued 4,900 permits. Of those 4,900 permits, 2,100 of those had what we call the base fee. So those were still like types of permits with the base fee, miscellaneous electrical work, changing out plumbing items like a water or sewer replacement or water heater replacement. Maybe standalone heat and air, I got a brand new furnace and ductwork. They're usually kind of one-dimensional type scenarios, lawn irrigation. So again, did 4,900 permits, 2,100 of them had that base fee. So those would be the ones impacted. The other fee, and this is it's not really a new fee. We just don't have an after-hour inspection fee. We just really haven't had one codified in writing. We've done after-hour inspections over time, but it's just kind of been, we just kind of made it happen, right? And again, so this is not a scenario where somebody loses power and it's 4 o'clock and my phone rings and they say, "Hey, can you send an inspector out there? This old woman needs her, just trying to get her power on." That's not that is an after-hours inspection. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a contractor says, we'd really like to pour concrete Saturday morning at 5 a.m. We could do it any other time, but we really want to do it right then, and we want you to come inspect it at 4:30 a.m. Saturday morning. And so in the past, we took them on a case-by-case basis, but we really didn't have any real way. So it could get abused too. Like, we just want to do this, right? And so there was no kind of incentive. So the idea is not to punish or even be punitive. It's to kind of weed out the people who are dealing with needs versus people who are, wants, right? And so the $200 fee, it would be excessive for some folks just trying to do something, but the idea there is to qualify for folks who really have that need, right? And so that's the basis of the fee. We've historically charged $75 for that service in the past, which again, by the time I get an inspector, have them come into work, get them dressed, send them out to the job, I mean, the $75 fee probably didn't even pay for his salary with gas and fuel and all the kind of payroll additives. So it was, again, we don't do a lot of these. I mean, I don't have a number on how many we did in '21, but it would be less than 12, frankly. It's not a large number. Only other fee that's shown up on here, and again, it's a fee we've administered by state statute or administered, but we just haven't had it codified, was that Oklahoma Uniform Building Code Commission. They obligate us to charge a $4 fee every time we issue a permit. And we've been doing that, and we remit that $4 for every permit to them on a month-to-month basis. And there's a 50-cent administration fee that is associated with it, and we've never collected on that either. And so certainly wanted to put in writing to, that we had it codified, that there was a $4 fee, even though I could go grab a state statute and show you why I should be doing it. Just seemed redundantly important to have it here. And the 50-cent fee was, again, not a huge deal, but it was an allocation they allowed. A little bit of data, just so you know, we're not too far out of line with anybody else on these fee asks here. City of Edmond asked for $50 for their first reinspection, and they asked for $100 for a subsequent reinspection. So if you get turned down in Edmond, it's $50, and if you want the guy to go back there again and he fails you, it's $100. So we're certainly, still being friendlier than what that is. A base fee, their base fees were around $30. Now, the only qualifier I'd say with their base fee is they had a lot of qualifiers. So different cities do different things. So they had a $30 base fee, but they also looked at, okay, so you're pulling a plumbing permit. How many sinks do you have? How many water closets do you have? So they'd charge you $30 for the base fee, but then they'd say, you got 2 sinks and 2 water hydrants, so that's $7, and so I made that number up. But then it was a small number they would add on to their base fee. So in most scenarios, their base fee would probably still be higher. Oklahoma City was $38.50.
Second. Councilmember.
Sorry.
Yeah, just gonna note that I've noticed this in some areas where our base fee may be higher than some other cities, and we get kind of criticized or whatever, but then you look into it a little deeper and you find out, yeah, but our base fee, you get all this stuff, and these other cities don't give you all this stuff. So you're actually paying more in these other cities. They just don't have it as an upfront cost like we do. And so it looks like we're more expensive, but then you add on these other things, and it turns out they're actually more expensive, and you don't get as good a service.
That can happen quite regularly. You're not wrong. You're not
Anyway,
wrong.
just wanted to. Yes.
And so you can kind of see there, I don't know that I need to step through each one of them, but the base, Oklahoma City was $38.50, but they had qualifiers as well. Moore was a flat $30 on their reinspect fee, but their base fee was $30, and they also had the qualifiers. So the recommendation for 35 keeps it simple. I actually like our fee. I don't want to have to count how many sinks are going in when we issue a permit. It's just more, it's more data recording, more entry, more work for the applicant and for staff to track a very, very small item. So again, I like easy and keeping the flat fee there. Gets us back on par with most of our neighbors there, and again, not a huge grab, I don't believe. So we had a change also to our fire code, and the big change with the fire code occurred this. There used to be for a long time the adoption of the fire code. The International Fire Code is what we've been under for a cycle, but they also companionly have been adopting what they call NFPA 1, the National Fire Protection. So they had 2 codes. They had a code they adopted for permitting, and then they had a code they adopted for enforcement. And there was some challenges with that, and that if you're operating under one code over here, permitting at one code here, but trying to do your month-to-month annual inspections over here, you could end up with some challenges. So the codes have similarities to them, but they do have some differences as well. And so you could get into a scenario where we permitted it that they needed, and I'm making this up, fire extinguishers every 50 feet, and the other code might say they need them every 35 feet. And so now we permitted it in year 21 at this point, and then at the annual inspection a year later, we have a staff member saying, you need to add this. So that was kind of an awkward scenario. So the International Fire Code, the IFC, again, it serves every purpose that the NFPA 1 code does. And so the recommendation from fire was to eliminate let's stick with 1 code, let's stick with the International Fire Code, and go from there. Mr. Aaron, anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I would just say that NFPA is the fire department standard. This is what we use when we test everything, when we do testing hose, testing ladders, testing our people. We use NFPA as our standard. IFC included in all those ICC codes, IFC is one branch of that, references NFPA quite often. So anything that a builder needs to comply to that is in the NFPA is referenced in IFC, therefore making it code. NFPA is a standard. It's best practice. It's the best you can do. IFC, ICC code is what you must do. It's code, NFPA is a standard. So when we adopt NFPA standard, we actually make it a code, and it makes it near impossible. It's already difficult to build, and our goal is to obviously let buildings be erected and function. So we don't want to make it any harder for anyone. I think NFPA was just something that put unnecessary and undue standards or restrictions on builders. And IFC covers it all. So I think dropping it makes sense. The reason being, initially prevention wanted it as or prevention used it and needed it for some of their annual inspections. Again, those are all covered in IFC. We don't need that in place. So, and another thing, Greg, just want to kind of defend Greg, and I don't know if I need to do this or not, but as far as adopting codes, I think Norman being in 15 code is not an unnormal thing. A lot of still 2012 code cities out there, so we're doing just fine.
Thank you. Another change, and this was talked about in some different committees, so I included it on here, but this is more when I said there's clarifying language. So one of the clarifying languages that we wanted to put in this update was, some language that historically, the way the code was written regarding foundations was that small unoccupied structures that were 600 feet or smaller didn't require, what the code called a prescriptive foundation. And I'll show you kind of a picture of what we're talking about. And to clarify that same thought, we wanted to make it known that that same prescriptive foundation wouldn't necessarily be required for structures under 400 square feet. But to make sure that we didn't have any loopholes or a problem potential with the structure just blowing away, there's some language we added that to clarify that even though we're not going to require the prescriptive foundation for these types of structures, these smaller structures, we at least want 4 points of contact with the earth or the foundation. So it's written in such a way that we can kind of have our cake and eat it too. We can, for folks who want to build, an economically, structure like this carport or a small storage building for their barn, or even like a little tiny house or something. And I'll skip to the next photo there. If you look at that detail on the left, that's its prescriptive foundation. And so it's an 18-inch excavation, 12 inches wide, has rebar and concrete, and has a stem wall coming out of it. And if we ask folks to do that for this little small carport or footing up there in the picture, which kind of what the code would imply in some scenarios, that'd be a heck of a cost. I mean, you might spend more money hiring a concrete contractor than you would on the carport or on that little accessory storage building. So that's kind of what we have from prescriptive. You'll see out to the right just some examples of what might be shown as one of these connections to the earth, these 4 points of contact. And there you're seeing like an auger style, a manufactured home style. And there's lots of different ways an individual could go about securing something to the earth or to a footing, but just as a brief example. And so we talked about that in some prior meetings about carports and some items, and I thought that clarifying that, you guys kind of pointed out to me that this might be a good time to clarify, that thought. So I appreciate the feedback we got in those discussions. It did actually help shape some of what we were proposing as a code. In a little bit, one of the things we do have here in Norman is an energy credit program. And so I've been here a couple of times in some meetings where we updated that program. One point we were awarding credits for a benchmark score of 65, which frankly ended up being a little high because kind of the standard at the state had been trending this way for a long time. So we got caught in the middle of an adoption. They were updating their state standard in real time, and they were potentially proposing a benchmark score of 51. So I had to come to you all before in a meeting, not knowing what the state benchmark score was going to be, other than they were talking about making it a 51. So we went with that recommendation at that time, and for 1 year, our energy incentive program was around a 51. Well, the good news is they did finally adopt an updated standard at the state level. Their benchmark got updated to a 64. So when they did that, we came back and said, okay, let's update our 51 score. We made it a 57, which was still a very, very respectable energy home. And again, in this case, the lower the number, the more efficient the home in this particular scenario. So the state's updated. I just kind of wanted to show you that what they had updated the standard to, which is currently the 64. Your benchmark program that we're working with right now is a 57. I think it will be there for another year plus. So don't have to worry about that. And so we did get it right in the end. And again, that's a good home. And if you're ever curious about these, an ERI or a HERS rating, a home built in 2006 is presumed to be a score of 100. A home that uses no energy at all is a 0. And so these are essentially percentage efficiencies over year. So when they being the state made a minimum score of 64, that home is 36% more efficient than the home we were building back in the 2006 standard. So right now our incentive program, the home is 43% more efficient than what was being built again in the 06 year. It's kind of how that works. So that, again, there's other code changes. I mean, if you want to learn more of them, there's a webinar. You can get a lot more, and if you didn't get enough in the webinar, I'm happy to send you more information and documents about. Again, there's lots of published lists, but these are certainly some of the bulk of them. So, any thoughts, questions?
Council, just a note, I was in conversation with city clerk about potential dates to bring the item before council for action and adoption. We're thinking March, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I asked Greg to hold off until we adopted the recodified code because there's a lot of changes. And so he graciously is doing that. We are, next week we'll have first reading on for the recodification of all of the code. And second reading will be the first meeting in February. And so his will kind of follow up to where it coincides with the effective date of the recodified, so.
And it's an ordinance, first reading, second reading, effective 30 days afterwards.
I just want to thank you for the presentation, and I specifically want to thank you for giving us kind of an overview of how many inspections we've had, what is the rate that we have re-inspections, and permitting and all that kind of stuff, because we get a lot of comments about the difficulty of that process. But to see it in numbers, as this is not the majority of cases, I know that it's troublesome for the people that have to go through it. But I think it's really interesting to see 27,000 inspections in Norman, and then 3,200 of them were an inspection with a re-inspection. So that's a much lower number than what I would have assumed based on the feedback that we get from some people in the community. And then just also understanding where our other cities in the metro are with their fees. I think it's helpful for us to put that into perspective in a kind of a real way, and that we are right now, unless we update our fee, the cheapest, which is another thing that I would not have assumed based on the feedback that we get from the community. So I would just like to highlight that sometimes what we're hearing is maybe not always factual. And so being able to go and hear this from our staff members, I think is really important. So thank you for giving us some concrete numbers to add to the narrative that we've been hearing. Just really a comment.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Our next item is item 3, discussion regarding the purchase of property. Are you doing that, Joyce, or is Karen? Lisa. Okay. Lisa, let's take a 5-minute break. Okay. And let's be back here at whatever 5 minutes is.
6:55.
That was when I kept saying over and over.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, sir?
Where's this location at again?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Really well.
Is next to
The fans, nobody wants to, they all came to watch Greg. They don't want to come and watch us.
Merge.
We're good. All right. Item number 3, discussion regarding the purchase of property located at the northeast corner of Imhoff Road and Oakhurst Avenue to be used for affordable housing. Anthony and Lisa.
Alrighty, so ongoing identification of potential properties to be using for affordable housing. This is the one we've identified, and it is now going to be on the agenda for next week, next Tuesday, the purchase and sale agreement. So we wanted to bring this to you beforehand and give you a little introduction to the property, what the plans are for it, and then just kind of go over any questions now, so that you kind of have a little bit of information before next Tuesday. Here's the property. It looks real fancy. It's undeveloped property on Imhoff and Oakhurst, so it's a blank slate. It's right, if you know where the Hitachi plant is in Norman, it's just north of there. There's like a church next to it. You'll get a better, in a couple of next slides, a kind of better understanding of the neighborhood it's around. It's approximately 5 acres, just under, and we would be under contract for just over $500,000, so $525,000. It's currently zoned a PUD. It was zoned that way in about 0809 for about, I think, a 75 unit senior development. We gave that PUD in like I said, 08 and 09. It hasn't really taken off. I'm not sure exactly why. It wasn't, I guess, didn't work out for that developer. But we would need to rezone it for this affordable housing project. It is outside of a no flood zone. It's in a certified census tract, and then it also, this particular site we've been talking about affordable like tax credit financing for affordable housing projects. This site, the way where it's located, it would score the maximum for location criteria. So that would be it's a competitive location. So the little green star, it's the peak property. As you can see, it's just south of a bunch of residential parcels. To the left, that big pink area, I think you guys just approved a PUD or a SPUD for another residential area. It's next to some commercial. That gray below is industrial, and you can see just in that corner the Hitachi plant. It's about a mile away from it's not on the map, but just kind of to the northwest would be, I think, a Walmart neighborhood market. So it would be close to a grocery store. I don't think there is a bus route that goes by this area. That's like stuff we like to look for, but this is kind of the look of the area. So under the contract, what we would be doing if you approved it in the next up to 180 plus 30 days, we would be doing our due diligence. We would be getting an appraisal on the property. That way we know we're paying a good price for it. We'd get a property survey, make sure that we are getting the property that we're paying for. We would do environmental assessments, making sure it's not on like a petroleum burial ground, making sure that it's a safe property for this use. And any other inspection we would need to satisfy any tax credit financing requirements, because we are getting governmental funds to fund it. So we want to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's. The due diligence period for this property, it's quite long. It's 180 days. So, and then we'll have another additional 30 days if needed. We just need to provide written notice that we want those extra 30 days.
Anthony, why is that?
I don't know why it was this long. We didn't draft the initial, part of this contract. We probably wouldn't have asked. But hey, we'll have all the time we need if we need to. We're not going to use probably all that time, right? We're going to start off the ground running as soon as you guys approve the contract, if you approve the contract. But since it's an undeveloped process, like for example, if we have an environmental assessment and we come back and we need to do phase 2, we would have plenty of time to do that, I think, in this. So it does allow us a lot of wiggle room. And even if we need more for whatever reason, which I don't think would happen, I'm sure the seller would be happy to work with us on that. But we have plenty of time here. I don't think we'll need it. Valuation of the property. When we were given the purchase and sale agreement by the seller, we we looked at the purchase price they were asking for, and we thought it was reasonable, so we went with that. We would get a formal appraisal, however, during the due diligence period. And we, just in evaluating that purchase price, we looked at some comparable properties that recently sold. And the undeveloped parcels that we looked at, and we looked at quite a few, anywhere from, $2.23 to, $6.99 a square foot, or, about $100,000 to $300,000 per acre. This is on the lower end of that, so we're very comfortable with this price. So I think that we're pretty well situated in terms of purchase price. I'm not worried that we're going to be overpaying for this property. So, and purchase price seems pretty good. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. She's going to kind of give you the idea of like the projected, like once we get the property secured, what we plan on doing with this property.
Back in early December, I think it was, y'all had a study session to where Daryl Beavers from OFA was here, as well as the DeBruylers consultants that specialize in this kind of work. During that, they kind of gave y'all the short and dirty tax credit education, and I can see eyes rolling back in your head. It's common. And so what we have engaged with the DeBruylers to help us guide through this process. And, as in that meeting, it's the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program administered by the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency, funded by the Department of Treasury. That's a lot of words right there. It is very, very complicated. Karen and I have sat through multiple trainings and we still don't understand it. It's just that we understand that with this project, we have the potential to actually leverage the funding that y'all have set aside for affordable housing to 2 to 3 times that amount. There's the 9% program, which is a January and June. Applications were due last week for the January 2023. It is a potential that we could possibly hit the June application period this year. Things would kind of have to move rather quickly. The 4% program, you can apply any time, but to get a matching 4% with that, to bring a total of 8%, you're really shooting for that January submittal date, because those additional 4% tax credits from the state of Oklahoma are allocated during that January timeframe. So it's one of those things that it's very calendar driven. Talking with the DeBruylers and then with Mr. Beavers also, they feel that the location of this site is great. 10 out of 10 on the potential scoring. The entire scoring package is about 65 points, and so that's a small part of it. A lot of it depends on the amenities within the development. So let's go ahead. Okay. One of the requirements of the program is that they just will not let anybody apply for this. The City of Norman would be required to partner with an established tax credit developer, which is preferable. When you think about all of the ins and outs of not only developing this property, but managing this property and meeting all the federal requirements, having a developer with this experience is imperative and required. Additional partnerships that we would be pursuing, the city would be pursuing, dependent on how the structure plays out as far as the willingness of the participants, as well as how that affects our competitiveness within the application period, could be the Norman Housing Authority, the Affordable Housing Corporation, and our CHODO, Community Housing Development Organization, which is Norman CHODO 2015. The DeBruylers we've had multiple phone calls, and they are assembling a pool of potential developers that have experience in the type of project that we want. To be honest, I really did not know there were so many different forms that this could take. As we have talked with you guys time and time again, one of the needs that we have is for smaller units, 1-bedroom units, some 2 bedrooms, and then some 3s and some 4s, but primarily 1-bedroom units. They have a pool of 5 different developers that have worked in Oklahoma. They're not all located in Oklahoma, but they do have projects within Oklahoma. And we will be doing a preliminary round of just phone call interviews. Karen and I had the opportunity with Richard McCown to actually sit down with 2 of them when we were at the Affordable Housing Conference a couple of months ago, and it was night and day, their approach to how they do these things. So we're in the process of developing a list of questions to get some feedback from that, and then we will actually be doing a formal RFP process for the developers to submit what their proposals are to the city with a review committee to rank those before it comes back to council to talk about the official partnership. Yes.
So if the building is built as it's proposed, who's going to own the building?
That's part of the things to be decided depending on how the council and the scoring mechanism would see fit. Obviously, the city of Norman is not a housing operator. But the city of Norman will be investing a lot of money into this. And so one of the things that was talked about was the possibility that in order to apply for a tax credit project, you have to have site control of the property, and it has to be appropriately zoned. And right now, it is not appropriately zoned for what the intent is. So if the city purchases the property, it could be structured to where the city owns the property, and at a later date, dependent upon the developer and the city, it is determined that the ownership would revert to another entity such as the Affordable Housing Corporation or the Housing Authority or something like that. Those are all details that still have to be worked out as we start structuring how this beast can come to be.
That's what I'm sure.
In terms of the rezone, and I don't know if anybody's here to talk about this, but would we be rezoning it as like updating the PUD or creating a SPUD? Like, I think that it's probably makes sense for us to really hone in on what we're going to be doing on the site,
Right.
and to really show the community that like this is what we're doing, this is the proposed use, this is our vision,
Yes.
right? And that would require something like a PUD or an SPUD.
Yeah, it'd probably be an SPUD since
Yeah.
it is less than 5 acres. And in talking with the 2 developers that we spoke with, they have designs and models that they have replicated, modified to meet existing sites. And so that will be one of the criteria as we go through the RFP process. That's why that June date is probably a little bit premature because of all the steps that we'll need to take to get ready to apply.
Yeah.
Go on down here. The way it would work is that when we initially penciled this out, Richard McCown was instrumental in helping us get this started he had looked at the possibility of just doing a series of duplexes. And with this site, we were able to get 72, 74 on the site. Talking with the 2 developers and seeing their designs, you're looking at more of a multifamily apartment complex to increase the density. For a 4% application, which would be the 4% plus the 4%, really to make that cash flow, you got to have about 125 units. For a 9%, you're down to about 90 units on the site. So those will be things that, as we go through the feasibility of this, that will get determined, which will then be reflected in the proposed zoning.
Okay, so we
would
won't
want to
zone
zone
until
it
we
for the
know
maximum use.
what the project is, but then we will tailor, just so the community understands like
Sure,
where we're
yes.
thinking about zoning,
Yes.
and thinking about how we can really hone in on the desired use and the specifications, and like basically with an SPUD, we're writing our own zoning ordinance within that document. So just thinking about, all of the questions that we've had around affordable housing,
Right.
like all of those can be answered when we write that zoning.
Yes, because we would be
Document.
coming forward with a partnership with the city of Norman and the developer for this. And the developer, by that time, they would have outlined according to the criteria of the model that they build, how many units are feasible on that site, the composition of the units, both for the model that they're used to build, as well as the feasibility for getting it funded.
You know, and the extra layer of protection to the community at large, information put in the application process to receive those federal dollars, federal tax credits. I'm going to talk about the level of maintenance in these projects. It will not be allowed to fall into disrepair, or the developer could be on the hook for giant tax consequences.
Yeah,
from
I
the
feel like
federal
this
government.
Part of the due diligence that we will be doing with the proposed developer is not just reviewing the proposal that they provide to us, but also reviewing the projects they've built, both those that are recent and those that are 10, 15 years old, just to see the level of maintenance and upkeep for those projects.
Yeah, not to be, talking down on the other projects that we've looked at, but this one really provides a lot more opportunity for us to be targeted and really kind of hone in on, and tighten down all of the questions that
Or
our
fingerprints.
community had. So, like, this seems like, a route that we might want to continue taking into the future.
Very
It allows,
replicatable.
and it allows a lot more opportunity for input from the public when we have to rezone, and like every step of the way that has potential for public input.
Nice to not have to redo.
Yeah.
Nice to go in and do it. Right?
Yeah.
Did you still have a question?
Yeah, I got a little bit on this, so please be patient. I'm gonna say this. I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm telling you what the pulse of the people is gonna say about this. So the plans, are they, or at least a good swath of people? I know that there's disagreement in this town. I think I got the pulse of a pretty good chunk of them, and we'll get to that. Are you looking at like tiny places like food shelter has right now? Is that the plan?
No.
Okay,
No,
like
these
apartment
are,
complexes?
a tax credit property consists of a range of bedroom sizes that target specific incomes. And depending upon the project and how it is configured, you can target certain number of units to less than 30%. All of the units have to be less than 60% on average, median family income. You can do some 30, some 80, as long as everything. But this is housing that is not tied to supportive services. This is housing that will accept Section 8
So
for,
it doesn't require Section 8, or a certain percentage has to be?
no, it does not require.
Okay, okay. And I'm sorry, I didn't jot it down when I was up there. What was the total that we're spending on this or proposed?
The purchase price for the property itself, just the bare property, $525,000.
When we met with the two developers, they had priced out for approximately 100 units, and the cost was $16 million. And so for our $5 million investment, we could potentially have a property valued at $16 million
Okay,
by the use of tax credits.
okay. Here's the thing, that when it's talking about low-income housing or anything, there's a lot of people that say, why are you doing that? You're importing poverty into Norman if you cannot afford to live here. Man, there's been places I've wanted to live, and I couldn't afford to live there. I had to work my way up and do that. And there's plenty of towns around here, and there's work here. That is a legitimate argument. If you disagree with that, that's fine. But it is a legitimate argument, and that's the way people feel. Why are we doing that? Why are we bringing in people that can't afford to live here, and we're subsidizing them to live here? I get that. I'm just saying that's an argument. I'm not.
Well, and I wouldn't see it that we're importing people. They're here. We have a shortage of 9,000 rental units that are affordable. I mean, this is, not meeting that, but these are citizens of Norman that cannot afford to rent.
And
a place in
I will go back to that. That is life. If you cannot afford to live where you're at, you can fix it with your feet. That is just how life rolls sometimes, and that's the reality. And I do not think that it is the government's job by any means to supply housing to anybody, taxpayer dollars. And I'm telling you, if you do this, here's one question. What about the protest percentage? If this has to be, what is the protest percentage that it has to get to where it has to have some other majority of the council? Isn't there something like that?
70%?
It's 50, it's above 50.
If it's
More
a-
than 50.
You have to have a supermajority?
vote,
So what happens when we buy this and there's a protest above 50-something% and we're holding land that we can't even get passed in council? Because there's no way I'm supporting anything income housing. So I'll just tell you now, because I don't believe in the government doing that. I do not believe it's the government's role. Now, if they have housing and vouchers, I don't think we should be buying land or building buildings. If there's federal program that's already in, that's already established. We don't need to be establishing more and using taxpayer dollars when we had a slide to begin with. We have all these bridges going out and kids going over those. And when you're going to use taxpayer dollars to do this kind of stuff, I'm telling you, you're going to get one or the other. You want to get trust with people in the county or in the city to pass these bonds and stuff. You can't spend money like this on things like this. These are wants and these are not needs. You might think that they're needs, but that is not the needs of the taxpayer. You're subsidizing people that probably, I'm just saying, when people get mad with the way that you spend their money, when you say, hey, we need these bonds for these bridges, and like, well, why don't you use the money that you spent on the affordable housing? That seemed like that was more important. That seemed like your priority, but now you want more of our money. You want more of our taxpayer money. And that is the reality when it comes to the wallet of the taxpayers. This is not the function of city government. Bridges is.
Well, hopefully your future church helps the poor.
That is the job of the church. It is not the job of the city.
send
It
them your
is the
way.
job of the nonprofits.
That's what I'm crazy.
You were talking about that 30 to 80%, is it median income thing? What?
You would ask that off the top of my head. I can look it up for you, though. It's based on household size. And so I believe that 50% median income is about $30,000 a year.
Honestly, I cannot remember that number off the top of my head either.
It's
But on the
higher than
tax-
you think it is. That, I think it's about $28,000-$30,000 a year. It's on the website, so.
This is for folks who are falling within that. They're like basically working poor.
Yes, yes.
I was just wondering if
Yeah.
that point.
The other thing is that.
Just a second, Lisa, that,
Oh,
Councilmember Hall.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna mention that, just in the last 2 years, I read about how Oklahoma City metro areas had the single largest increase in percent of rent, and it's 24%. The Oklahoma City metro area has increased in rent in the last 2 years, and it's by far the most of any metro area in the United States. And we know that most Oklahomans, we're a poor state. And so a lot of Oklahomans are in poverty or barely hanging on. And the churches and the private sector are not able or willing to fully address this problem. So the state government's not doing it. The federal government is giving money out. But like, if nobody's doing anything about it, who's supposed to do something about it? Like, we just can't let people get pushed out of their homes, because then they're going to end up on the streets in Norman, which we also don't want. Or in one case, a single mother wrote me and said, I used to love Norman. It used to be a place where a single parent could raise their kid, but I just moved to Noble because I can't afford to live in Norman anymore. That same person's just gonna move to Noble, and then probably have to move to Lexington and the next small town that's further and further away. And then those same people have to spend more money to drive into town. It's just like, it's a really massive problem with really complicated and intricate. And just in like my own situation that I mentioned last week, part of it that I didn't mention was that, yes, I found another place to move, but the rent is more than double what I've been paying for the last 11 years. So thankfully, my fiance and I could absorb that together with both of our incomes, but how many people in Norman wouldn't be able to? If your property owner came to you and said, hey, I'm gonna sell the house, I'll give you a few months. I was fortunate that I got 5 months to find a place and move and all that, but a lot of people could be, you've got 30 days to get out. I'm selling, or I'm tearing it down, or I'm doing something else with it. And how many people could afford to pay double their rent like that? than what they've been paying. So I really wish it was not a situation that we had to address or that I felt like we had to do something about. Because I would ideally prefer the private sector or churches or anybody else to be addressing this housing affordability problem. But like something's got to give because it's just, there's no cap. Rents are just going through the roof with there's no guards on it. So what are people supposed to do? I mean, moving is expensive. So you get kicked out of your house, how are you going to move if you don't have any money? Deposits for new utilities, it all adds up to a lot of money. Deposits first month, last month, rent. So just for us to move is like coming up with over $3,000. First month's rent, last month's rent. Thankfully, we could transfer over, existing utilities. But if you had to move to a new town, you're probably gonna have to get a new whole deal. So it's just really complicated. I see perspectives of those that do not prefer the city government be involved with it, but I just don't see anybody else doing it, and I don't see the problem getting better by us not doing anything. And so I'm just willing to explore any and all options that we can find to keep people in our community from losing their homes that they have, or trying to make sure there is a guaranteed place in Norman where there's somewhere affordable. And so, that's why I've been supportive of exploring all these options. I'm interested in this piece of property. I'm interested that it's a heavily wooded piece of property too. So I'm kind of interested in the environmental aspect, what kind of species may be living in that wooded area, that type of stuff. Any disturbance we might be making to it if we developed it. Stuff like preserving trees and things like that if we did go forward with it. So very interested in this piece of property and any other options that come forward. Because again, I think it's something we've been put in a position where there's nobody else that's going to do anything in this state. And if we don't, then we're just telling people, we don't care about you, be on the street or leave our town. We don't want you here. And that's just not how I feel about it.
I guess just to the point about us purchasing it and then not being able to move forward with the proposed development or finding a partner or any of those other things, or we go, do our due diligence like we've done with subsequent other projects and then have decided that we are not going to fully execute the contract and purchase the property. That's all still viable. It's the same pathway for the other projects that we've had, right? And we have found things that in other projects that have not allowed us to move forward, and we were true to our word saying we're not going to move forward if this is not a viable option. So continuing, and if we don't enter into a contract to purchase, then we cannot do all of those due diligence things that is going to allow us to figure out if this project is even viable. So just because we say we're going to approve this contract and go forward doesn't necessarily mean that those funds are spent. We've got to figure all of those things out. But I've heard us talk about in other projects that are not related to affordable housing, thinking about purchasing real property for whatever. It could be for something else that is for the city, right? For like a water treatment plant or things like that. And we have always seen property, especially greenfield property, as something that is an investment and will only increase over time. So say we do end up purchasing the property. It's not viable for us to put an affordable housing situation here. Now we own a piece of property that then we could turn around and sell and make money off of. So
In this case-
I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. Yes, we're talking about affordable housing in this scenario, but we're really looking at a piece of greenfield property as well. That is an investment.
Right, with your ability to zone it, and if you do your homework and decide we don't want to zone it with an SPUD for an affordable project, and decide, nope, what's the highest and best use for us to flip it and get our money back and go do something else, that, if you just zoned it single-family residential, my guess is you wouldn't have to hold on to it for very long. The PUD is probably why it's sat there as long as it has. It's one more entitlement hurdle
Right.
that some other developer would have to clear before they did anything with it. And you
My
could run-
prediction is that someone was possibly packaging a senior tax credit project that did not get funded.
Yep.
That's what I've read.
Is it a possibility that, kind of what she was saying, that she doesn't mind it, buying it, but is it a possibility to make it contingent on the rezoning? The sale contingent, like, hey, if it doesn't rezone, then we're all out.
But wouldn't that require the current owner to rezone it? If that's in the contract?
I don't know how that would work.
Owner has to do it.
Okay, so,
I don't know. That's why I'm asking a question.
sure. So when we see developer-driven projects come through the planning department, normally it is the developer who is the potential buyer, and they have a contract that is contingent upon their ability to rezone and pursue their project with the seller. So the seller always has to sign off because they're the current owner, of course, but it's usually the developer and their contractors, their engineers that are kind of driving the process. So in a case where, I mean, it's our project, we could certainly make it contingent upon the vote. We would want to be careful about something like that. There's a lot of strangeness, and you can't contract zone or anything like that.
My thing is that if it goes out there and if the neighbors don't protest it, I would support it. But if they protest it over the 50%, I'm not gonna vote for it. And I don't think anybody should.
Well,
'Cause that's the
I
people
think
that
that's
have to live
fair.
by there. I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm not, it's the people that have to live over there by it. It's not gonna affect me. But, I mean, I'm just not at all in favor of the city doing that ever. And that's just my position, and that's a lot of people's position, that we don't think that that is the job of the city. And you can beat up on me or think I'm terrible for that all you want, and I don't care. Because that is a very reasonable position. Even if you disagree with it, a whole lot of reasonable people have it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's fair if you say, if it's over 50%, that you're not gonna continue to approve it, but like, that's not the conversation that we're having today. We can't even enter into that what-if scenario unless we move forward
That
with
was
the
that
project.
second question, that is also too, that you think it might be a good investment, it might be a piece of land we're stuck with, I don't know. That's what I'm saying, if we could do it contingent on saying, hey, it depends on if these neighbors want this to happen or not. If they want it to happen, I'll gladly stamp approval on it, and if they don't, I'll stand against it with them. And that is a reasonable position all around, and that is a compromise, and I think that if you do that, and you say, yeah, this is contingent to make sure that we can happen, if not, we just don't have that piece of property as a city. That is, I don't know, makes sense to me.
Beth, you think you could write up such a purchase and sale agreement, an offer?
Well, I mean, I think first we'd all have to agree that that's something that we would want to
Yeah,
see.
we need consensus from council.
No.
And that, I mean, okay, so we'd be kind of be put in the position where one of the parties, like, an agreement to the agreement is contingent on the party agreeing to the agreement to agree. Right?
Yes, I think
That's
we
my
don't know,
point.
I guess, if the seller
that's
is
even
willing to
possible.
add that kind of
Yeah.
a term to the contract. It's something that would have to be explored.
But we would have to say that we want it explored, right?
Yes, always.
I mean, I know I'd like that explored. That's a decent option and make people feel better about it.
So our goal is, I mean, we're not voting, but consensus helps us with direction for our next steps.
So, and keep in mind, so this is set, the purchase and sale agreement currently negotiated with the seller is on the agenda for next Tuesday. If you guys want us to explore that, we'd have to take it off that agenda.
No.
No.
And probably renegotiate if it's even possible.
Okay. You're running a risk, is all I'm saying.
Go ahead, Lisa, please.
I did look up the income limits. 60%, 50% is 27.8. 60% median income for one person is 34.4. So,
There's a lot of professions in this town that we want to keep in this town, such as teachers and law enforcement, and a lot of professions that I
Many,
wouldn't call poverty, but
many people that work at OU don't make that. There are salaries at the university that are within that threshold.
Right.
So let's just think about our largest employer in the city.
I'm sure we have city employees who fall into that criteria too. Just a note that, as Mr. Francisco is the guy that signs the quarterly reports to the federal government, if we do purchase this lot with ARPA dollars and then do not successfully get there, we'll have to repay those ARPA dollars, put them back in the pot for another approved ARPA use.
But
And
couldn't
could
we
do that-
sell it?
We could do that by selling the property and putting the funds back, so.
No harm, no foul.
2026 is the deadline to spend all the money.
You know, we've been talking about the low-income housing tax credit projects, and as we said, they're very competitive. If we package this and we apply and we apply and we apply, and it's just the writings on the wall that we are not going to be funded with this, there is a Plan B. As you guys are aware, each year I come before you with our home and CDBG projects. We do receive $400,000 to $500,000 a year in home funding. And so initially we talked about this lot of possibly purchasing it, get it zoned appropriately, get the infrastructure in, and then allow us to incrementally develop affordable housing on that as the funding comes in. Certainly, if the city decides to utilize the ARPA funds that y'all have set aside for this, we also have some home ARPA funding that will be coming to you next month to discuss, as well as our regular home entitlement funding. Last year, we built 3 houses. We just thought we hit a home run. We're slowly chipping away, but this would be another opportunity if the low-income housing tax credit projects do not work out, and then we could incrementally develop this.
Plan B does meet the ARPA limit. We're still building affordable housing. We just wouldn't build them all at once with the tax credit project. We'd build them incrementally in our annual allocation.
We'd take it as
of-
far as we could with what we have, and then continue to build it out as we go forward. It'd be smaller, and it would take longer. The home ARP funding, we have till 2030 to actually expend it, so. Any questions?
Go back to the minimum income limits again. What was it again? This slide on the income for the houses?
26.
Can you go back to that page again, or can you send this to us? 'Cause I like to read this more.
Yeah, I've asked Anthony
Can you do
to
that?
send it to me and I'll send it to you
Yeah.
all.
Look, I'm not a no or I'm not a yes right now. I know that we need to do something because we have people. Oh, did you do this?
No, you're good.
Fire away.
I came up after you.
Pistons fire.
Look, the funding out there, if we have the funding for it is one thing. I know we have the need for it. It's also a component we have to evaluate too as well. The churches and nonprofits just don't have the money to give and do something like this. And I know we go back and forth on affordable housing here in Norman. But the component, I think it's important to at least discuss that a lot of folks that work for the city, this would benefit them too as well. I know some folks that work here that have to live in Moore or Newcastle because they can't afford to live here. I mean, I think the title low income housing or affordable housing is just throwing people off because I don't think the city should be involved in the housing projects just by the title of it here. I think we should come up with a different title because it's going to be hard to pass in our wards if we have this discussion. Again, it's not a conservative or liberal issue here. It's a place where, do we have a place where people live? Okay, and I think that's a legitimate conversation to have. Right now, we're having that conversation, so it's a good starting point here. But the vote for this is when? Next week or the next agenda?
Tuesday.
So if we decide to go forward with this contingency in the contract, would that put it off for another week, or are we still looking at that as a group here? We're not looking at that, or?
I'm gonna.
It's on the agenda now.
So the issue when Kelly says that we have a hard time passing this is that, traditionally the city should focus on infrastructure and things like that. So with the protests that come in for developments and zoning changes like this, I would have to say that I would have to closely look at the protests and see where they're at. So, I mean, right now it's in Ward 1, and Holman has a good point that we don't have a representative for Ward 1 right now to have this conversation, to either yes or no, we want this or we don't want this. And so, in lieu of that, I'd like to have more conversation with you and get more questions answered so I can bring it back to my ward and have that conversation. So it's there. I'm on the tipping point, just not there yet. So that's where I'm at on this. I see the need for it. And like I said, we have to have employees, like, if they have to travel out of the city here, it's ridiculous. If we have the land, we have the opportunity to do so, why not?
Do you want to pull it off the agenda?
I don't know yet. I mean, what do you guys think? Should we
then
keep it
put
on
it
the
off for a
agenda
month?
and maybe for another month and just look at this and see, and look at the best options, look at all the options? It's up to you on how you guys want to do this and how should we go.
But we literally can't do anything until we like approve.
No, I
doing it,
understand
though.
that.
Like,
Yeah, no, it's a sticking point.
Well, I mean, we can't, a lot of the questions will be, I think, part of that due diligence period, and until we enter into a contract, we can't even do that.
I know that, I know. So, for right now, I'm okay with this staying on the agenda the way it is, and we'll go and go
That's
forward
just
on that.
what it sounded like you were doing, so I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I think worst comes to worst, we have to flip it, we rezone it. I'm with City Manager Pyle, I think if you rezone that thing to R1, you'd have a buyer the next day. You look at everything around it right now, obviously that area is ripe for single-family development, so I don't think we'd have any trouble unloading this if we had to, especially for the price. When you look at price per acre, and 300,000 was the upper end, and we're getting this for less than 100,000 per acre.
Yeah.
Again, I think I said it the other day, you make your money when you buy, so.
Well, and I think that even though it was zoned in 2008, 2009, it was zoned for a 75-unit multifamily development.
And do we know why that fell apart? Okay, there's nothing on the site that was like,
No.
they didn't find arsenic in a well or something like that.
Yeah, it felt, well, and there was a parcel nearby that was like 17 acres. When we first started looking for, where could affordable housing go? And the 17-acre site had been zoned for a multifamily affordable project, and that developer was unsuccessful in receiving his tax credits and just walked away. And that was the first place we called Karen and said, hey, let's go take a peek at it. It was way too big. 17 acres was ginormous. We said, we need something a little more digestible, and lo and behold, across the street, 5 acres, that's a little more digestible than the 17 acres.
who owns the land?
Start the clock.
I'm sorry?
Who's the landowner?
It's like a LLC or something like that. It's I don't know.
Holding company, yeah.
I definitely agree that I think it's a good real estate investment. Just remove whatever we want to do with it out of it. Just the city owning that piece of property could be worth something. It's a corner lot
So we bought and put a park.
in a growing area too, with the new hospital over there and everything. So, I mean, I could see it having a desirable use, even if this were to fall through, and an opportunity. I don't foresee a situation where the city would be stuck or lose money on this regardless.
And we have a 6-month due diligence period.
7 if you count the 30
Right,
days.
the 30 days, yeah, 6 plus. So, I mean, that's a considerable amount of time for us to think about actually fully executing.
And hopefully you'll have a Ward 1 representative by then, I'm hopeful.
Councilmember Grant.
I was gonna say, I know the Ward 1 representative, or formerly, I'm not really sure where we are on the process of that, is supportive of affordable housing, given all the stuff we've been doing. But my other question is about the census tract, because there are other parts of Norman that fit that census tract for tax credits.
Certainly, there's multiple qualified census tracts within the city. We have not found affordable land within.
So this is a really attractive census tract.
It was a small enough, manageable site. Certainly Karen is constantly prowling, looking for vacant land.
What goes into
This one came about 6 months ago, 5 or 6 months ago, came
What
forward.
goes into that census data? Like, what is the benchmarks? Like, is it gonna be certain, obviously,
I am not
income?
for sure, to tell you the truth. A QCT, a qualified census tract, is actually set by the government based upon multiple criteria. There's a map I can send you that shows where those are in Norman. And the program does award additional points for that if it is located in a QCT.
We may be able to touch base with Lisa's HUD representative and just say, can you tell us what that criteria is?
We could probably just look it up.
Yeah, I think we can find that for
it.
Council.
Yeah. One thing that Karen brought up is that even though it's called the low-income housing tax credit, really, we need to kind of flip that conversation away from the low housing qualifier. Basically, what these projects are a range of apartments that are deemed affordable, meaning that you do not pay more than 30% of your income towards rent based upon the different income criteria that is set by the developer of the project, such as if you have X number of units that are affordable at 30% of the median family income, then the rent is based upon 30% of the 30% of the median family income. Same way for the 50, 60, and the 80. And so it is dependent on the unit size and the household going in for that designated unit, there's different rents. So.
And I think there's an argument too in understanding what people are saying. If we're trying to also recruit businesses to come here to prosper, you have to have workers, you have to have engineers, you have to have all kinds of other stuff. Those guys at the bottom end of the pole are hard to find. I know my daughter, working in the restaurant business, is staying at 50% staff because they can't bring enough people in. They're bringing them in from Chickasha. And so that's a lot of money driving from Chickasha. And so I think that's a valid argument. It's hard to get over the idea. I think I have trouble like Kelly does, Councilmember Lynn does, in the idea of government owning housing. But that's why we have the Karens of the world. If we can shift that over to an organization that actually runs houses, it makes sense to me, as long as it's not the city, because our job is infrastructure, roads, sewers, those kinds of things. And so it's an interesting conversation. I haven't come to a decision, but it's an interesting conversation that I guess I got a week to figure out, right? Yes, sir.
You know what? I think you hit it on the head here. You know, it could be considered part of infrastructure. If we look at it in the sense that we're trying to attract businesses in the SEC and make it more of a place to live, to bring people to work to the city of Norman, this might be one of those issues and an item that they look at. You know, how much housing is available to bring people to work here? I mean, look, on the east side of Norman, restaurants don't stay open past 9 o'clock on Friday sometimes because you can't find enough workers out there. They're just not in town. So I'd like to explore this more and see where we are in 7 months. I mean, we can do a lot in 7 months. And if we don't find a solution, sell it and build a Topgolf there. I'm okay with that.
Not quite big enough. Double A.
Or maybe a mini Topgolf.
Mini Topgolf. Putt-putt Topgolf.
I also think there's just an important caveat when we talk about government housing. You know, all housing is pretty much government backed. If you think about Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae, I mean, it's just, you know, FHA loans, all that. Government is in the business of housing, and it has been for hundreds of years, and I think we're not doing anything different. So.
All right.
We have done several different presentations to this council and other councils on affordable housing, which have the census numbers and things like that in it. And I could send one to Brenda and she could push it back out to y'all to refresh y'all.
Thank you. I would like to have that too. Thank you.
Yeah, so that would be good.
Thanks,
Other
council.
Comments or questions? Let's go home.
Always